Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for coming tonight, for supporting GLAAD. And I just have to start by saying, I'm also really thrilled. My family is here, right here. Jenny, my spouse, and Jean and Sarah, our daughters, thank you for coming tonight. Really appreciate it. So it's been quite a year since we saw you last October. And since then, just to get into the grim part of this, we have faced unprecedented attacks. They come from within our nation, and they extend across our nation and beyond. They affect our families, our schools, our workplaces, our communities. Few have been spared, in fact, because the current administration undermines our health care, our environment, our safety nets, our values for all Americans. The administration and what it has unleashed on LGBTQ people, on people of color, on Jewish people, on Muslim people, on women's control of their own bodies, on immigrants and the DACA youth, on the poor, poses extreme and relentless challenges. And yet, we have opportunities. We have cross-movement organizing growing stronger and ever more strategic, and we have also centered economic and racial justice in this work. So where do these challenges and opportunities leave us? I think we are at a moment of truth. It is going to be a very long moment for our nation, for the rule of law, for justice, and certainly for GLAAD. We say this: GLAAD is rising, and there is no choice but for all of us to rise together, both to push for and defend justice. And there is no choice but to succeed. Let me tell you a little bit about our work, our rising, which the legal department, as you know, is led very capably by our legal director, Gary Busick. And I want to talk to you about the work, if I may, in 3 buckets. Bucket number 1 is that GLAAD really tries to advance fair and just and equal treatment as a legal norm and as a cultural norm, including on the job and family law, equal access to public accommodations across all sectors of society. And I want to give you a few examples. First is the transgender military ban issue announced by the president in July. Now, being a transgender person, like being a gay person, is just who you are at your core. And in a nation with constitutional promises of liberty and equality, open service by qualified transgender persons is required by law. GLAAD's challenges to the ban with our colleague organization, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, involves courageous plaintiffs, always, many plaintiffs in the room, we love you. It also involves crucial partnerships with the firms of Wilmer Hale and Foley Hoag here in Boston in the first case we filed. In that first case, we are really setting the frame for the litigation. And we've also joined a second case with Latham and Watkins in Equality, California, in what will be the last case, I think, up in the courts. So together, we challenge this ban armed with truth. Just as it was for gay people under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, transgender people serve with patriotism and valor. The truth is that transgender service members are whole, healthy, committed, capable, and invaluable to our nation's defense. The truth is that being transgender has no impact on ability to serve. There was an exhaustive study, as only the military can do, at all levels, that concluded that there are no military barriers to transgender people serving our country, no combat readiness issues, no unit cohesion issues, no nothing. And I want to just, since I may, give a shout out to Attorney General Maura Healey in her office for supporting our motion for a preliminary injunction in that first case with an amicus brief at the district court level, which is unusual, and we really appreciate it. Thank you. So you will hear from one of our plaintiffs tonight, Dylan Cohere, about how this ban threatens his life goals to serve, and also from the leader of GLAAD's team on this case, the amazing Jennifer Levi. Jennifer, wherever you are. So equal treatment also means securing protections against discrimination. And that means, among other things, GLAAD remains part of the Freedom Massachusetts Coalition to defend our transgender public accommodation law here in what will be one of the most critical ballot measures in November 2018. In court, it also means that GLAAD is a very key part of the coordinated effort to using existing federal laws prohibiting sex discrimination to address sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination. It may sound complicated, but it's actually kind of common sense the more you think about it, because whenever you're discriminating based on sexual orientation and gender identity, you've totally are taking sex into account in your brain. Okay, so we've been briefing this issue in numerous federal courts of appeals around the nation on the correct legal analysis and also on why those reflexively bad decisions from decades ago should not block the correct interpretation of the law. And GLAAD also recently led the front of the court briefing in a First Circuit case here in Boston involving these same issues and discrimination against a Rhode Island firefighter. And we're hoping that the First Circuit will get the law right and uphold the jury verdict that was awarded in her favor. Yeah. And in a development also that would affect all of us, earlier this month, we also filed a brief at the Supreme Court in support of their granting review in a case out of Georgia on behalf of a woman named Jamaica Evans. Now, Lambda Legal, our colleague organization, represents Jamaica, who's a security guard or was at a hospital, and who was harassed and forced out of her job because of who she is. So we are certainly hoping the Supreme Court will grant review, given the split on this issue nationwide. And I want to say what this means if we were to win, that we would have protections under existing statutes for employment and housing nationwide without a bill, even though we still think bills are pretty important. I also want to mention a case that's not in the headlines, but that we think is extremely important. GLAAD attorney Allison Wright is working with our very brave client, Lynn Rivera. Lynn went to the Springfield Rescue Mission Giveaway Center here in Massachusetts for clothing. So the giveaway center is open to all, but when Lynn shopped, they were told they could not take clothing from the men's section. But when an organization in Massachusetts opens its doors to all, it cannot discriminate, even if it is a religious nonprofit. It can't police who you are and what you wear. And so GLAAD is standing with Lynn so that no other people who are transgender or people of color experience discrimination, particularly when they are so vulnerable and in need of help. I also, since we're in the fair treatment bucket, I'm sorry, I have to talk about this too, which is equal treatment of our families and of young people. So on the family side, many of you have heard us over the years say family is also a whole lot about love and commitment and not so much about birth and marriage and adoption, that it matters what our intents are when we form a family and how we conduct ourselves in raising our children. And I want to say you're going to see after dinner, I think, a video with Karen Partinen talking about a case involving her. She just won. We all just won. Big team there. So I want to let her talk about that. But I do want to say that GLAAD is now trying to keep cases out of court. We are trying to get parentage sorted out at birth in the hospital. We want every baby born to an unmarried same-sex couple to go home with both the legal and emotional security of parentage in place. And speaking of staying out of court, what we are also doing is trying to build on the legislative gains we have from Maine and New Hampshire, to extend those in other states, Vermont, Rhode Island, and here, to advocate for legislation that respects the diversity of our families and protects children. And I think those things all have great possibilities for progress. So let's go to bucket two. Bucket two is addressing discrimination, disrupting assumptions about who we are, literally changing institutions and how we think about things. So again, you'll see in a video, GLAAD attorney Ben Klein talking about a recent win in a case that I will say was only necessitated by fears and stereotypes of people with HIV. I'll say no more, you'll see it in the video. For another, we are working with state partners to pass bans on conversion therapy in all of the New England states by 2020. And GLAAD is the crucial legal arm and messaging arm in these efforts. And this year, we achieved victories with our partners in Connecticut, as well as in Rhode Island. That makes 3 because you have to add in Vermont. We're going to be up in Maine in the short session in 2018. And we still have bills pending in the Massachusetts and New Hampshire legislatures. So maybe it'll be by 2018. We'll see. And what these laws are about, just to be super clear, is that therapists who are licensed by state boards will no longer be able to harm youth by peddling the idea that there is anything wrong with them because of who they are, because there isn't. So our youth, in my opinion, really stand brave and strong despite the very real barriers they face in terms of social stigma, bias, and family rejection. And GLAAD works on the systems that touch young people's lives the most: schools, child welfare, and the juvenile justice system. So I want to give you a data point. LGBTQ youth are 5 to 7% of the youth population, but they are 20% of incarcerated youth and 25% of youth in our child welfare systems. And in these systems, LGBTQ youth are at greater risk of abuse, injury, and suicide. So in Maine, along with GLAAD attorney Polly Crozier, I've been working with, working with LGBTQ clients incarcerated in Maine's one youth prison called Long Creek. And when a transgender boy died by suicide last fall, it was a wake-up call to us, to the intense suffering of youth there. Our informal estimate, now that we have been there a lot, is that 30% of the youth inside are LGBTQ. And we are pushing so much. We are pushing for thorough investigation into the death, for changes to outdated LGBT policies. We are pushing for remedies to what we view as very dangerous and abusive conditions. And most importantly, we represent individual youth there to try to keep them safe and get them out. Some of these youth were failed by parents who were supposed to love them unconditionally. Others by child welfare systems that were supposed to protect them, and schools that were supposed to educate them and keep them safe. Now for all of them, the juvenile justice system is supposed to rehabilitate them and is instead inflicting harm. GLAAD is absolutely standing with them to help them be heard outside those walls and to stand up to powerful systems. And I want to read you an excerpt from a piece written by one of our clients there, who's 16. We need each other. Nobody knows what young people need more than young people themselves. What will it take for our society to realize that youth incarceration harms not only our youth, but our communities? Youth are locked up and told they can change, but how many kids who get locked up actually get the support they need to make changes? Take the time to work with us. Please don't just send us away. Well said. Okay. I want to turn to the third bucket, if I may, which is that GLAAD continues to stand strong against what some people call the backlash. We see it as a counter-movement that is determined to erase LGBT people from public life and has been fighting us for decades, long before we won anything particularly significant. Now, marriage continues to be a focus of the counter-movement, and it's serious. We won nationwide marriage, as you know, in Obergefell with language of equal dignity under the Constitution, vindicating the full promise of liberty, the bans violating central precepts of equality. Felt great. For them, it was a call to action like no other. And one of the post-Obergefell strategies is to relegate our marriages to a second-class status. So GLAAD and a small band of others have been fighting in court in places like Louisiana and Texas and Arkansas about how to read. You see, the Obergefell opinion says that same-sex couples can marry and enjoy the, quote, constellation of government benefits, protections, and responsibilities as all other married couples. Is that hard to understand? So we helped the National Center for Lesbian Rights reverse at the Supreme Court a ruling from the Arkansas Supreme Court saying a married same-sex couple couldn't both be on their children's birth certificate. That was nonsense, but we needed the Supreme Court to say so. And last week, GLAAD and NCLR together filed a brief again at the United States Supreme Court in support of the city of Houston, Texas, in a case challenging the extension of spousal employment benefits to city employees. Again, this was a straightforward issue under Obergefell, one of the constellation of benefits. But the Texas Supreme Court, ruling 4 days after that Arkansas case came down from the Supreme Court, unanimously sent a case about employment benefits back to a lower court for a hearing on the meaning and application of Obergefell. And it accompanied its own ruling with a call to action, encouraging litigants nationwide to bring cases and assist the courts in figuring out what Obergefell means. This is not going to stop. Then, I'm sorry, this is the bummer part, okay? Then there is the Masterpiece Cake Shop case taken by the Supreme Court with oral arguments in December. Now, Charlie, in this case, is handled by the ACLU, which is doing a fabulous job. Charlie Craig and David Mullins are a Colorado couple. They went to Masterpiece Cake Shop in the Denver area for a cake to serve at their party back home, the reception, after they got married here in Massachusetts. And they were refused because of the owner's religious beliefs. Now, this is a cake shop that's open to all. It's a business that serves the general public. And under Colorado law, and same as here, that makes it a public accommodation. So it can't pick and choose its customers based on who they are. So Charlie and David went to the ACLU, went to court, and they won in Colorado. Now, the issue at the US Supreme Court is whether the bakery owner should have a right to refuse service, otherwise required under non-discrimination law, because of his beliefs about gay people and marriage. His claims are, he says, rooted in the Constitution, the First Amendment, and so they are seeking an exemption on constitutional speech and religion grounds. And if they have their way, it would be other laws as well. I just want to say, if this were permissible, if we were to lose this case, we would obviously have a very big hole in anti-discrimination protections that we've worked very hard to achieve and defend. They would be able to turn people away, deny service, treat them differently with impunity. Now, under current law, businesses can absolutely pick and choose what they sell. You don't have to sell Halloween cakes if you don't want to. But they can't pick and choose who they sell to. And the humiliation that comes from being turned away isn't remedied by finding another bakery. In some parts of the country, with a trump card like that in place, good luck finding another bakery. Now, I am sure this baker's cakes are beautiful. I know there's videos circulating of him that his lawyers put together. But the fact that a business sells creative products has never been a justification for discriminatory conduct. Our brief will be going in on Monday. Again, it's another brief with NCLR. And I think there are going to be about 50 briefs, is what I heard this morning coming in. And I want to say, I think we're right. We're right under existing law. But what's concerning is that the court took the case. And no one way or another, this case is going to be profoundly significant for our community going forward. So I want to say this. These are extraordinary times. And my hope is that together we will lift our voices so that all in our communities are seen, heard, and that together we will fight for our nation, for its values, for the rule of law, and for justice, because there is no choice but to succeed. Thank you.